Hello, fantasy football fans, and welcome into Week 10 of Across the Nations. I'm Mike Walsh, alongside the mayor of Pound Town, Drew Harper. And Hunter Taylor. Darren Sharp, hold my dick! Hold my dick! Hold my dick! We'll be along with some matchup previews, some playoff picture scenarios, and some conspiracy theories according to trades that happened in Abbottabad. Stay tuned.
Speaking of that trade, Michael, we've got some breaking news that has just come in about Cam Newton, so we're going to try and get that for you guys as well.
And we'll get to that right after the intro. Welcome back in. Mike Walsh, once again, alongside Drew Harper. Drew, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thank you for having me on your show.
Hold on one second. Sounds like we have some breaking news coming in from the studio.
You know,
Cam Newton has been added to the injury list for the Panthers. Do you have an update on this?
You know, my source is Mr. Schefter. He's been telling me that Cam Newton has just underwent a neck surgery, pretty serious. Similar injury to what Peyton Manning had.
Wow.
The nerves are not regrowing right now. It's a pretty slow nerve regeneration. It's looking like it's a season-ending injury. This is pretty big. This is directly going to impact the playoffs here. There's just a big blockbuster trade. We won't get into that just yet. But big blockbuster trade involving Cam Newton. Latest report we got, Cam Newton out for the season. Neck injury. We'll have more for you guys later.
That's just a tough break.
It is.
It's a tough break.
It is.
It's amazing that we know all that information so quickly.
It is, you know, and it just goes to show the general management of what's his name? Brandon Arnold. What's his team name this
Something
week?
about Tebowing.
Tebowing, Joe Pa. Sorry, Brandon. Tough break.
Well, Drew, you mentioned the trade that went down lately, and it was a hot-button issue within the league, no doubt. So can you explain to the viewers what happened in Abbottabad over the week between Austin and Brandon?
Well, you know, Mike, before I get into what's happened this week, I want to let everybody know that in previous leagues with Mr. Brandon Arnold, you know, he's been known to kind of sandbag leagues. He's thrown players conveniently to teams trying to make a playoff push. Cole Poland has been the recipient of one of those blockbuster trades where Brandon gives his entire team to another player. I wouldn't say that's necessarily what's happened with this trade. Points-wise, it's a pretty fair trade. You know, you get Cam Newton who's averaging, 23 a game. Branch who's averaging, who cares about Branch? He's garbage.
7 or so.
Right? Just a throw in to make the numbers work.
Right.
But
right.
Brandon, he's giving up 2 number 1 wide receivers, you know, Macklin and Greg Jennings.
Put the team on your back, though.
Put the team on your back. I mean, those are the 2 top wide receivers for the 2 most high-profile offenses, and he's getting a rookie quarterback, which, you know, I mean, what week are we in here, Michael?
This is going to be Week 10.
Week 10, and we already have a team that's playing for next year. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm a little bitter about that, you know. The way it works out, it's really going to have a big impact on the playoffs here.
It is going to have a big impact on the playoffs. We'll talk about that in a minute. But, you know, I think it's important to point out that with only a 13-week regular season, I mean, we're more than 2/3 of the way through this thing. And in a keeper league, I don't really blame Brandon.
You know, it's tough to find fault when you look at the numbers, but having been with Brandon through other leagues, I wouldn't put any sort of conspiracy past him. But I mean, numbers-wise, it's not a terrible trade. It's definitely going to shift the balance in the playoffs for this year. You know, Austin's sitting on the outside of the playoffs trying to make a run. Got to watch out for that Dirty Sanchez, though. He's won 4 straight, so that's going to be quite a division to watch here.
And when we come back, we'll talk about the matchups in Week 10. As we've mentioned a couple times, glad to have the mayor of Pound Town alongside. We're going to go ahead and make some picks for Week 10. I know it's a little late to get started on this. Thursday night game in the AFC West kind of shifted the balance here so far, but It didn't make a huge impact except for in one game, perhaps. QB Carousel myself picking up 29 points from Michael Bush as I take an early lead on Jockstrap Jockeys, but not really a surprise, right, Drew?
It's really not, and I'm very surprised that Carson Palmer's had a big spark for that offense, as you notice on my bench. Mr. Moore had 24 points. Speaking of Moore, that's a tough one today. Boise.
Yeah, we'll move on.
We'll move on.
So anyway, picks from the QB Carousel.
Picks from the QB Carousel. Michael, I can't knock on you for having 29 points. I'm gonna have to pick you in this one. So yeah, you take it home, big fella.
Yes!
Take it home.
Really moving into that playoff picture after a rough start.
I mean, Presnell with a big upset last week. Anthony, props, good win. I'm glad you topped 100 points. Congratulations. But yeah, I just don't see you getting after it this week, buddy.
All right, so QB Carousel, the winner in the first matchup, and I concur, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty easy right now.
Yeah. Okay. You got a 27-point cushion already.
Love that.
Gotta love that.
Love that. Okay, next matchup we're going to look at, Darren Sharper, hold my dick, against Colonel Muhammad Al-Gaddafi.
This is a really interesting one. Darren Sharper, hold my dick. He's pretty stacked. He's got a little bit of inconsistent play. Marcus Colston, Deshaun Jackson's just a huge question mark. He's
really a quarterback.
Tony Romo. Tony Romo. I mean, what Tony are we gonna get? It's just it's terrible.
You don't know.
But the thing that kills me about John is your team's done great, but if you're consistently at the bottom of the waiver order, you're consistently getting those top picks, you're bound to come back. You're bound to have some good players. Unfortunately, I don't see you winning this week. I've got to go with Darren Sharper, hold my dick.
Now, what do you think about Colonel Muhammad Al-Gaddafi? You got DeMarco Murray on that team. He's been a spark plug for the Cowboys.
Right.
Do you think he can keep it up for the Colonel?
I don't think he'll keep it up for the Colonel. I think he's been a huge spark plug for that Cowboy offense. I haven't looked at his point total, but I know he's racking up the yards.
All right, no doubt. So you're picking that one, Darren Sharper?
Darren Sharper, hold my dick.
I'll go the same. The Yakos Suck It Seahawks taking on Call Me Coach in our next matchup. What are your thoughts on this one? It's really strange.
It's really strange. I'm really surprised that Barge decided to drop Ahmad Bradshaw. That's kind of a Brandon-esque move.
It was a strange move.
Really
earlier in the season, I'm divulging some personal information here, but I offered a trade. Joe Flacco and Ahmad Bradshaw wanted them both. He dropped them both. And, he could have Frank Gore right now, and he could be looking at the playoffs.
He could, and it's really disappointing because that's what you get when somebody's been relegated to Japan. And on that similar note, John, I'm calling you out here. I wanted the Bengals defense, and you went and I tried to trade you for him. You went and dropped him a week and a half later. That's shit, John. That's shit.
So back to the matchup that we were talking about. Aaron, coming off a upset loss at the hands of myself, and he put up like 50 points or something stupid, just giving up basically.
Yeah.
What happened? Can he bounce back?
It's going to be really tough for him to bounce back, but ultimately I think he's going to get the win.
At least he gets him at home, doesn't have to travel to Japan this weekend.
Right, that's huge.
Makes
the travel. Aside from the cost alone to get to Japan,
sure.
that's a red-eye flight, as they call it. Maybe it's a long flight. It's a long flight. Yeah, you don't want to make that trip.
For sure. All right, I'm going to go with Call Me Coach now.
Absolutely.
Might knock Barge out of the playoffs, though.
That's one thing. Barge has not had a strong squad all year. He's been in the cellar the entire season. Not surprising one bit.
Absolutely. It's going to be an interesting game, though, because that will say a lot about the playoff race after this week. Call Me Coach looked to have a spot locked up, but lost last week. If he loses again this week, he's right back with the rest of the pack.
Well, it was an unfortunate loss for Call Me Coach because had he won, he would have put himself in the spot in the top tie for the top
upper echelon with yourself.
With myself. It would have been a big win. Unfortunately, he just couldn't get it done last week.
All right, Call Me Coach to get himself some distance in that.
Definitely.
And the next matchup we have to talk about features yourself, Downtown Pound Town, taking on that team that keeps changing his name so nobody really gets to know who he is. Really a poor branding effort out of South Beach.
It really is. We can just refer to him as Joe Pa.
That's fair.
I like it.
Maybe Sandusky.
Ooh, that's pushing it a little bit. A little too soon.
All right, fair enough. Anyway, we're going to talk about the matchup here. He's got an early lead on you, 5-4.
You know, he does. Unfortunately for Brandon, his 5 points did come from his tight end. It's Antonio Gates. Put a lot of stock into Antonio Gates. Took a high draft pick on him. Really hasn't panned out for Brandon. I really hope that Antonio Gates does get it going. My 4 points came from my kicker, so I'm not too stressed about that. Looking into this matchup, I think it's going to be a pretty high-scoring affair. You know, the Cam Newton injury, that's definitely going to have its toll on Brandon. Brandon, yeah, it's going to put a huge cripple on him. I'm not sure what he's going to do at quarterback. Michael with Hasselback again, you know. I'm looking forward to this matchup, knowing that Brandon's going to be leaning on Beanie Wells and a herd of Akeem Nicks and Chris Johnson. I mean, I'm really not sweating this one right now.
What are your thoughts on Chris Johnson?
You know, that's a really interesting one. I feel like just looking at him and his numbers, I feel like he has to have lost a step. But you know, there's something to say about holding out and skipping all the, even though they didn't have that many preseason workouts. You know, skipping all those and just not coming into the season in game shape. It really says something about the character behind Chris Johnson.
Are you ready to throw him in the Sean Alexander category?
I wouldn't quite go there yet. You know, I mean, personally, I've tried to trade for Chris Johnson, you know, buy low sort of thing.
Sure.
But it's not looking good. He's just really struggling. Like, he hasn't put up numbers all year. You know, he's still getting the carries. In fact, I mean, Javon Ringer, he's playing a lot better ball. He's running north-south instead of Chris Johnson, who runs east-west. You know, it's just a lot better tailback right there.
All right, so back to the matchup. Who are you going to take in this one?
Well, I have to take myself. You know, I'm
certainly
a betting man. I'm not going to try and throw money down the drain, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, no, I totally understand. Yeah. I agree with you. I'm going to take yourself.
Thank you.
Downtown Pound Town for the win, and that could lock things up for you. That's right. And that next matchup you talk about, co-owner who just dealt Cam Newton and got a couple high-profile wide receivers that we've talked about as this has gone on, taking on Sanchez's Dirty, who is really just on a roll lately. 4 straight wins after everybody, including myself, counted him out. I mean, I didn't even think Brian was going to be able to score 60 points in a week, but here he's come just out of nowhere on this tear. What do you make of it?
You know, guilty as charged, Michael. I thought Brian was done at the very beginning of the season. I mean, he put up 3 of his first 4 games. He was at 75 points. You know, I just didn't think he had any explosiveness on the offense. You know, he's built his team on Arian Foster, and when your horse doesn't take you along, you know, it's just not going to happen. But fortunately for him, Arian Foster's put up 3 just absolutely monstrous weeks. He put up 78 points in the last 3 weeks. That's a lot of points. That's over 25 a game. You get that kind of production from anybody, you're going to win some ball games, and that's carried him and catapulted him right back into playoff contention. And actually, if the postseason started today, before we started this week, he would have been in the playoffs. Believe it or not.
Sanchez is Dirty would have found himself in the playoffs.
Believe it or not.
And playing for something.
Something.
That's really what it all comes down to.
Absolutely. Money on the line, and he's made a run when he needed to. He's got Eli Manning heading him right now. Eli Manning's playing league football. You can't argue that. I'm not a huge Eli Manning fan. You guys putting up huge numbers.
No doubt about that. And huge numbers is what we'll look for on the scoreboard this week. There are a lot of teams tied, and it would not be a surprise if anybody was tied for that 2nd, 3rd, 4th playoff spot as we get to the end, and it's going to come down to points. So everybody looking for that last couple points as we go in. Who are we going to pick here? Co-owner and Dirty Sanchez.
You know, I keep going back and forth on this one, and even though co-owner has completely rebuilt his receiving core, you know, he's really bolstered his roster to make a nice playoff run. I just don't think it's going to be enough. I don't think that you can stop Arian Foster. You know, I mean, 78 points over 3 weeks is just ridiculous. You throw in Eli Manning on that, and he's hard to beat.
And we're back. As Drew mentioned right before we went to break, he's got some breaking news right off of Twitter.
Well, Michael, we recently told the world that Cam Newton had emergency neck surgery, and that was per Adam Schefter. Anyway, long story short, Mr. Schefter was wrong. Very surprising. I've never seen that happen.
I don't believe you.
It's really hard. It's very far-fetched.
No, I don't believe that actually happened.
Anyway, Cam Newton, no neck surgery.
Weird.
Nothing.
Imagine that.
Nothing.
Huh.
Perfectly fine.
Well-
Adam Schefter was wrong. Brandon, looks like your team might be okay. I don't think you'll get the win this week after all, but I'm glad Cam Newton is okay. No neck surgery, no slow nerve regeneration. Should be all right, buddy.
All right, and with that, we're going to have to leave you for Week 10 of Across the Nations, but as always, your rebuttals are more than welcome. Drew, thank you for joining me
You know,
this week.
Michael, it's been a pleasure, and before I leave, I wanted to give a shout-out to the WSU quarterback for this week. You know, Connor Halliday threw for almost 500 yards and 4 scores. Huge game. We'll be looking for him on the waiver wire this week.
That's right. In this keeper league, you just never know who you're going to pick up. And Connor Halliday, just a redshirt freshman there at Washington State, but making a big impression in his first career start. Nearly 500 yards and 4 touchdowns as he led the Cougars to a big win against Arizona State. That does it for his on Across the Nations, and we'll talk to you next week. Enjoy the games.
Stay classy, Abbottabad.